Before we dive deeper into Elena and Luca's story, if you love dark romance, mafia drama, and forbidden love stories, make sure to hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss a single twist of this story. The city had never felt smaller, yet infinitely more dangerous. Elena Rossi walked through the streets, the echo of sirens fading behind her like a heartbeat she couldn't control. Every shadow seemed to whisper Luca Moretti's name. Every neon sign reflected a reality she could not escape. He was everywhere, unseen yet unmistakable. A ghost that commanded attention, fear, and desire all at once. She moved like she belonged nowhere, yet everywhere at once. The tabloids had plastered her face across screens and papers. The world had seen the kiss that stopped New York. Everyone assumed it was scandal, but Elena knew better. That kiss was war. That kiss was ownership. 3 nights had passed since Luca vanished into the chaos of sirens, and the city had become a chessboard. Every street corner, every rooftop, every alley held danger. Men watched. Alliances shifted, and she was at the center, unwilling and yet drawn closer to the storm that was Luca Moretti. By the time she reached the small apartment she tried to call home, she realized it no longer felt like hers. The door was unlocked, a subtle sign that someone had been there observing. Fear clutched her chest. Yet excitement followed closely behind, a contradiction she couldn't name. And then she felt it, a presence. A shadow at the window, familiar, unwavering. Luca stepped forward, his tailored black suit immaculate even in the dim light. Tattoos glimpsed on his neck and hands, a dangerous heir to a world no one else could enter. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. One look, one presence, and she knew. The city could watch. Tabloids could scream. Enemies could plan. He would protect what was his. She swallowed, trying to find words, but her voice caught. "You shouldn't be here," she managed. His lips curled, faint and dangerous. "I've never belonged anywhere else," he said quietly. Then, without ceremony, he took her hand, pressed it against his chest, letting her feel the controlled chaos beneath his calm exterior. "You think you have choices? You don't, not anymore." Elena's heart pounded. She hated him for it, loved him for it, wanted him and feared him at the same time. Every instinct screamed to run, yet every fiber of her being was magnetized toward him. This was the gravity of Luca Moretti, impossible to resist, terrifying in its inevitability. The night stretched around them, alive with sound, light, and danger. Outside, the city pulsed with life and threat. Cars, neon, distant sirens, footsteps echoing in alleys. And inside, there was only the quiet assertion of power and obsession. "Why am I still here?" Elena whispered, a tremor in her voice. "Because I want you here," he replied. "Not tomorrow, not later. Now. You exist in my world whether you understand it or not." Her stomach twisted, part fear, part anticipation. She realized she was learning a new rhythm. Survival measured in proximity to him, love disguised as possession and wrapped in protection. She wanted to run. She wanted to stay. She wanted him and loathed herself for it. Outside, the city remained unaware of the silent war unfolding in a quiet apartment. Inside, time slowed, compressed, charged with the tension that only Luca Moretti could create. Every heartbeat, every glance, every whispered promise was a claim. And as the night deepened, Elena understood the truth. There was no escape. He would follow, protect, claim, and demand. She could resist, she could fight, but in the end, the city had already seen the kiss that started it all, and so had she. In Luca Moretti's world, possession was love and love was war. The city had begun to whisper again, but this time Elena felt the weight of every word. Every passerby, every shop window reflection, every distant siren was a reminder. Her life had been stolen, claimed, and placed under a gaze sharper than any blade. Luca Moretti's name carried power, but his obsession carried her, tethered, inescapable and intoxicating. By day, she moved through crowded streets, a shadow among the living, unnoticed yet scrutinized. Every glance she received seemed loaded with questions. Was she afraid? Was she complicit? Did she know what she'd walked into? She did, and yet she could not escape it. Every step led her closer to him, as if the city itself guided her toward his orbit. Luca had reemerged in subtle ways. A car parked nearby, a shadow in an alley, a quiet whisper through a phone she didn't answer, and when he appeared, it was always with the same effect, command. He didn't need to touch her. A look, a stance, a presence, That was enough to remind her and everyone else who she belonged to. The first confrontation of Part 2 came in an alley near the Lower East Side. Men who thought themselves dangerous moved with confidence that would soon be broken. Luca stepped from the shadows, silent, precise, his tailored suit immaculate, tattoos glimpsed on neck and hand like marks of authority. Elena's stomach twisted, adrenaline and fear colliding. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. She didn't really want him to stop. He stepped closer, eyes narrowing, calculating. "Neither should they," he said, and in a blink, chaos erupted. The men who dared cross him were unprepared for the efficiency of his violence. Every strike measured, every movement controlled. Yet through it all, his eyes never left hers. The message was simple: "You are mine, and I will eliminate anything that dares to challenge that." After the dust settled, Elena felt a shiver she could not explain. Fear, yes, but something darker. Desire. A magnetism that terrified her because it was inevitable. Her pulse raced not from threat alone, but from proximity to him, from the knowledge that she had become part of his world, irrevocably. Even when they returned to his penthouse, the city sprawled beneath them, indifferent and sprawling. The skyline glittered like scattered promises, some kept, most broken. Luca's hand found hers, fingers curling around hers with subtle dominance, a reminder of the silent claim that had begun months ago. "You can't go back," he said softly, voice low, dangerous. "You are mine. Everyone sees it now. Every enemy, every threat. They know what they are up against." Elena nodded, though her mind screamed with uncertainty. Could she survive this world? Could she survive him? Part of her wanted to reject him, flee, reclaim control. But every instinct whispered the opposite. Stay, endure, submit. Because no one could offer the protection, the danger, the obsession he did. Outside, New York continued, alive with life and chaos. Inside, they existed in a bubble of tension and intimacy. Every glance, every touch, every whisper was a war waged silently. Love and obsession collided. Desire and fear intertwined. As night fell, Elena understood the truth more clearly than ever. In Luca Moretti's world, the city may see the kiss, the claim, the ownership, but she feels it in every heartbeat, every nerve. She is his, and he will ensure that the world, eventually, understands that too. The morning light in New York was deceptive. It promised clarity, order, normalcy. But Elena Rossi knew better. In this city, shadows were longer than streets, and every corner whispered Luca Moretti's presence. She moved through Times Square like a ghost, aware of every glance, every camera, every unnoticed observer. The kiss that had once stolen her anonymity still clung to her like smoke, twisting her mind and heart into knots she didn't know how to untangle. Luca was never far. She could feel him, in the subway's hum, in the reflection of a taxi's window, in the subtle vibration of her phone. And when he appeared, it was always precise, intentional. Not a casual encounter, but a claim. His tailored black suit, immaculate as ever, tattoos glimpsed along his neck and hand, the faint shadow of a dangerous smile. He didn't speak to announce himself. He didn't need to. He simply existed, and the city bent to his gravity. That afternoon, Elena found herself walking past a quiet art gallery she had once admired. The world outside was oblivious, but inside, every frame, every shadowed corner, seemed to echo the tension she felt. She tried to convince herself that she could reclaim a sense of normality, that she could breathe without fear, without desire, without Luca's weight pressing against her chest. But the truth was undeniable. She had entered his orbit, and escape was no longer possible. Luca appeared in the doorway, unannounced, and the crowd parted like water around him. There was no warning, no hesitation. He reached for her hand, fingers brushing at hers, the simple touch electrifying, dominating, possessive. "You can't walk this city without me noticing," he murmured, voice low and magnetic, almost a threat, almost a promise. Elena's pulse quickened. She wanted to protest. She wanted to run. And yet she remained, caught in a gravity she could not fight. Evening fell, draping the city in neon and shadow. They moved together through crowded streets, a duo of dangerous beauty. Every passerby who dared glance at her did so with curiosity, admiration, or fear. The city's whispers grew louder. The girl who had been kissed in public by a mafia boss was everywhere now. Yet only she understood the true weight of that moment. It had been power, control, obsession, not love. The night escalated. In an abandoned warehouse turned clandestine meeting space, enemies circled, subtle threats delivered in hushed tones. Luca's presence dominated the room, every movement precise, every word measured, every glance a warning. Elena stood beside him, no longer merely protected, but becoming part of the game itself. She felt the rush of power and danger entwined, fear and desire locked together in the same pulse. When the confrontation ended, the city outside continued, indifferent. Sirens screamed, taxi horns blared, neon lights flickered. But in that warehouse, time slowed. Luca's hand found hers again, a quiet assertion of possession. "You belong to me," he whispered. No one else could understand. No one else would see the truth. And Elena realized, with a mix of fear and longing, that she had entered a world she could never leave. The city could watch, the enemies could plot, the tabloids could scream. But in Luca Moretti's world, possession was everything, and love, if it existed at all, was only measured in control. The night swallowed them both. Shadows, danger, desire, all intertwined. And she knew, with absolute clarity, that there was no going back. She was his, and the city would never forget it. The city never felt so alive and dangerous at the same time. Elena Rossi moved through the streets with a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration. Each passerby, each flashing neon sign, every honk of a cab felt amplified, like the city itself was aware of what had happened, and of what was about to happen. Luca Moretti's presence shadowed her every step, a silent assertion that no one in New York could touch her. Not yet, and perhaps not ever. She tried to convince herself that this was temporary, that the world would forget, that she could slip back into a life that belonged solely to her. But every glance she stole at the reflections in shop windows betrayed the truth. Her name, her face, her very existence was now a symbol. And the man who kissed her in public, who declared her his, had ensured that. Luca appeared suddenly, as if he had materialized from the very shadows. His tailored black suit was flawless. Tattoos glimpsed along his neck and hands, each a subtle reminder of the danger he embodied. He didn't speak at first. He didn't need to. A single look, sharp and calculated, sent shivers through her. He closed the distance between them with silent authority, and she felt the magnetic pull she had come to recognize as his signature. "You can't hide from me," he said, low and deliberate, his voice carrying a power she could neither escape nor resist. She tried to step back, to breathe, to assert herself, but the city around them seemed to bend, to fade, to leave only the two of them in the center of its chaos. Every instinct screamed at her to run, yet every fiber of her being wanted to stay, to submit, even for a moment, to the gravity of Luca Moretti. The night escalated quickly. Shadows moved with purpose along the streets. Threats whispered and struck with deadly precision. Luca's enemies were clever, subtle, and relentless, but his control was absolute. He led her through narrow alleys and deserted warehouses, a labyrinth of danger and desire, each encounter reminding her that in this world, love and survival were inseparable. At a rooftop overlooking the glittering city, Elena felt the full weight of their reality. The skyline, alive and indifferent, reflected her conflicted heart. Luca's hands, fingers interlocking, a possession both tender and terrifying. "They will try," he said, eyes scanning the streets below, calculating every possible threat. "But no one can touch you. Not while I'm here." She shivered, a combination of fear, longing, and an addictive thrill coursing through her veins. She hated him, loved him, feared him, needed him. The dichotomy was intoxicating, impossible to untangle, and utterly consuming. By the time they returned to a quiet safe house, Elena realized that the city itself had changed. New York was no longer just a backdrop. It was an accomplice, a witness, and a player in the game Luca controlled. Every street, every shadow, every light had become part of their story. And as she looked at him, the man who had claimed her publicly, she understood something she could no longer deny. She was his. Not because she had chosen him, but because in Luca Moretti's world, no one ever chooses. They obey. The night deepened, full of secrets and silent vows. And somewhere in the heart of New York, the city held its breath again, waiting for the next move, the next danger, the next kiss that could change everything. The streets of New York had grown quieter, but the tension lingered like a low hum beneath every passing footstep. Elena Rossi walked beside Luca Moretti, her senses heightened, heart pounding with anticipation and fear. The world she had once known, simple, predictable, safe, had been replaced by a city alive with danger, desire, and obsession. Every shadow seemed to stretch for her. Every glance held a hidden meaning. Every whisper carried a threat. Luca moved beside her like a predator who had already won, yet remained endlessly patient, constantly calculating, always watching. He didn't just occupy space, he dominated it, and wherever he went, the city bent subtly, as if acknowledging his presence. Elena could feel it, the silent authority radiating from him. And though she wanted to resist, to pull away, she found herself drawn into the orbit he had created. That evening, a subtle warning arrived. An unmarked envelope slid under the door of her apartment. Inside, a photograph, Elena at the gala, the kiss seared into the public's memory, and a simple line written in red. "She belongs to me, until we say otherwise." It wasn't signed, but the meaning was clear. The enemies were watching, and so was he. Luca appeared in the doorway before she could react, eyes scanning the room, every muscle taut, every movement precise. He took the photograph gently, studied it, then let it fall into the trash without a word. "They test boundaries," he said softly, voice low, dangerous. "They'll learn quickly that I don't allow mistakes, and neither do I." His gaze fell on her, intensity blazing. "And you are untouchable, as I say so," the night continued, pulling them into the underworld of the city. Narrow alleys, shadowed rooftops, clandestine meetings with allies and enemies alike, every encounter a demonstration of power, of control, of the dangerous world Luca inhabited. Elena followed, hesitant yet compelled, understanding that her survival depended on learning the rhythm of his world, even as her heart refused to accept the rules entirely. By the time they reached a hidden loft overlooking the East River, the city spread beneath them like a glittering battlefield. Luca leaned close, the scent of his cologne sharp, commanding, intoxicating. "They will try to claim you. They will try to test me," he whispered. "But the truth is, you are mine. Always have been, always be." Elena's pulse quickened. Fear, desire, and a reluctant admiration warred within her. She hated the possessiveness, yet it thrilled her. She feared the obsession, yet craved it. She wanted to pull away, yet couldn't. And she knew, with a clarity that terrified her, that in Luca Moretti's world, love was measured in possession, and passion was intertwined with danger. The city breathed around them, oblivious and alive, yet every heartbeat echoed the unspoken rules of this dark romance. The skyline shimmered with neon and headlights, and Elena understood the price of visibility, scrutiny, danger, and a claim that no one could challenge. That night, as Luca drew her close, she realized the truth of it all. In his world, desire was control, obsession was love, and escape was an illusion. She could run, she could fight, but ultimately she would belong, as he intended, as the city had already witnessed, and as she was beginning, against her will, to accept. And somewhere in the distance, New York watched silently, holding its breath, knowing the story of Elena Rossi and Luca Moretti was far from over. The city had grown restless, as if sensing the storm that Elena Rossi carried within her. Every street corner, every flickering neon sign, every distant siren seemed to mirror the tension coiling inside her. She had learned to navigate New York's shadows, to move with caution, yet every step reminded her that Luca Moretti's presence was impossible to escape. He wasn't just beside her, he was behind her, above her, in the air she breathed. The evening started quietly, deceptively so. Elena walked past crowded streets filled with pedestrians oblivious to the war swirling around them. Cafes glowed warmly, taxi lights streaked across slick pavements, and yet she felt the tension pressing on her chest. Every glance she stole at the reflections of the windows showed her the reality she could no longer deny. She had become part of a world where desire, obsession, and danger were inseparable. Luca appeared suddenly, as if the city itself had pushed him forward. His tailored black suit was pristine, tattoos along his neck and hands visible in the dim streetlight, symbols of the danger and authority he embodied. Without speaking, he took her hand, his fingers curling around hers in a possessive grip that left no room for doubt. She wanted to pull away. She wanted to scream. But she didn't. She couldn't. "You don't understand," he murmured, voice low and magnetic. "This city, these streets, these people, they all bend around me. And you are at the center, always." His gaze bore into hers, relentless, consuming. Elena felt her pulse quicken. Every instinct screamed resistance, yet her body and mind were caught in the gravity of him, the inevitability of his claim. The night spiraled into chaos quickly. Shadows moved along the edges of the streets, subtle threats delivered in whispers and glances. Luca's enemies were clever, patient, relentless. And yet, he handled every challenge with the precision of a man who had built his empire on control, fear, and obsession. Elena watched him, awe and fear mingling in her chest. She realized that she was no longer merely an observer. She was now a participant in a dangerous game she didn't fully understand. Later, they reached a rooftop overlooking the river, the city's skyline stretching endlessly before them, glittering and indifferent. Luca's hand found hers again, tight, commanding. "They will test me. They will try to touch you. But they will fail," he said, voice steady, absolute. "Because you are mine. And the world will know it." Elena shivered, the truth of it sinking into her bones. She hated the possessiveness. She feared the obsession. Yet there was a thrill in it she could not deny. Every glance, every whispered word, every controlled movement reinforced her understanding. In Luca Moretti's world, power was love, obsession was protection, and surrender was inevitable. The city carried on beneath them, unaware of the tension, the desire, the war playing out in its shadows. Sirens, taxi horns, distant chatter. It all seemed muted compared to the heartbeat of their connection. And in that heartbeat, Elena realized escape was impossible. Resistance was futile. And love, if it could even be called that, was measured in possession, in domination, in danger. As the night deepened, she leaned into him, the pull between fear and desire electrifying, and she understood fully. Luca Moretti did not just claim her in public. He had claimed her soul, and New York, silent witness to it all, would never forget her name. The city hummed around them, indifferent yet alive with the energy of a million lives. And yet Elena Rossi felt isolated in the intensity of her own. Each step she took beside Luca Moretti was a lesson in control, desire, and danger. The streets of New York had become a stage, the crowd unknowingly complicit, their whispers fading into a background of sirens and neon lights. She had walked these streets before, unremarkable, invisible. Now, every gaze she caught reminded her that nothing was hers anymore. Luca was beside her, calm, composed, and lethal in the way only he could be. His tailored black suit, sleek hair, and meticulously groomed beard projected dominance. The tattoos along his neck and hands glimmered subtly under the city lights, a warning and a signature of his power. He didn't speak unnecessarily. His presence was enough to assert possession, to draw every eye, to remind everyone that Elena belonged to him. They moved through a crowded market street, the scent of roasted nuts and coffee mixing with the drizzle that still clung to the air. Elena carried herself cautiously, yet she noticed every reaction. Children pointed, shopkeepers whispered, strangers glanced. Curiosity, fascination, fear, all wrapped into one. And through it all, Luca remained her anchor, silent yet commanding, his hand occasionally brushing hers, a reminder of the claim that began with a single, unforgettable kiss. The first thread of the evening revealed itself subtly. Two men loitered near a dark alley, their posture deliberate, calculating. Pulse quickened. She knew the signs, the language of danger, but before she could react, Luca's presence materialized between her and them. He didn't raise his voice, didn't draw a weapon with theatrics. A glance, a step forward, and the men faltered, hesitation creeping into their confidence. The danger dissolved before her eyes, leaving only the knowledge that he controlled everything and everyone, with terrifying precision. As the crowd dissipated, they found themselves on a bridge overlooking the East River. The lights of Manhattan shimmered across the water like shattered glass. Luca's hand found hers, squeezing lightly, possessively. "They will always come for you," he murmured. "But so long as I am here, you will never be theirs." His words were calm, unwavering, yet carried a magnetic intensity that left Elena breathless. She leaned into him, torn between fear and longing. Every instinct told her to resist, to reclaim autonomy, but every heartbeat reminded her that she could not. The kiss that had marked her publicly had been only the beginning. Every encounter since had been an unspoken reminder. In his world, love was power, desire was control, and escape was an illusion. The city stretched before them, glittering and alive, but it felt like a backdrop, secondary to the storm swirling between them. Each whispered promise, each subtle touch, each glance was a negotiation of trust, possession, and surrender. Elena realized with a shiver that she had crossed the point of no return. She was entwined with him, body, mind, and soul. And the realization was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. As the night deepened, The skyline held them in a silent embrace, and Elena understood the truth. She belonged to Luca Moretti, utterly, irrevocably, and without choice. And as the city watched, the world whispered, and danger circled. She knew that the story of her and him was far from over. It was only intensifying, darker and more intoxicating than ever before. The city never slept. But tonight, neither did Elena Rossi. Every street, every flickering neon sign, every distant siren was a reminder. She had crossed a line she could never return from. And Luca Moretti, always present, always patient, always impossible to escape, was the gravity that held her in place. She walked beside him, every step deliberate, every heartbeat echoing in sync with the pulse of the city. He didn't speak much. He didn't need to. The way he moved, the way he surveyed the streets, the subtle tightening of his jaw, it said more than words ever could. Ownership, protection, obsession. She had been kissed in public, claimed in front of thousands, and every day since. The claim had grown heavier, more undeniable. The evening air was sharp, scented faintly with rain and asphalt, carrying the distant hum of New York's restless energy. Luca's tailored black suit reflected the streetlights in subtle glimmers, tattoos along his neck and hands catching the glow like secret symbols. When his hand brushed hers, it was a quiet declaration, an unspoken reminder that she belonged to him entirely. Elena felt her pulse spike, a dangerous mix of fear and longing. They moved through a quiet park, shadows stretching long under the lamplights. Every rustle of leaves, every whispered footstep, made her heart jump. But Luca was always there, a shield of calm and authority, his presence both a promise and a warning. "The city is watching," he murmured, voice low, magnetic. "But no one can touch you." "Not while I am here," Elena wanted to argue, to insist she could manage, that she could escape. But the words caught in her throat. How could she deny the truth? Every instinct screamed submission, every nerve alive with the tension that only Luca could provoke. The kiss that had stolen her anonymity was only the beginning. Each moment since had been a lesson in power, desire, and obsession. And she was learning quickly. A subtle threat emerged from the shadows. Two figures lurking at the edge of the park, watching. Elena froze, heart racing. Before she could react, Luca stepped forward, his presence consuming the space around her. A single glance from him, and the intruders faltered. The danger dissolved. No words, no weapons, only sheer authority. Elena's chest tightened. Equal parts fear and awe. They continued toward the river, the skyline glimmering behind them like shattered glass. Luca's hand found hers, fingers curling possessively. "They will always try," he said softly. "But no one can claim you. You are mine, and the world will see it soon enough." Elena's breath caught. She wanted to run, to argue, to reclaim control, yet a dangerous thrill coursed through her veins. Excitement, desire, and fear tangled into one undeniable truth. She was his, completely, in body, mind, and heart. And the city, unknowingly, was their audience. As the night deepened, the East River shimmered beneath them, the lights of Manhattan reflected in every droplet on the water. She leaned into him, aware that resistance was futile. In Luca Moretti's world, possession was love, obsession was protection, and surrender was inevitable. And somewhere, far below in the city that never sleeps, New York watched silently, holding its breath, because Elena Rossi and Luca Moretti's story was far from over. It was only beginning. The night in New York was alive with 1,000 distant sounds, sirens wailing, taxi horns blaring, murmurs of strangers, but Elena Rossi only heard the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat, racing in sync with the presence beside her. Luca Moretti moved with a quiet authority, each step calculated, each glance deliberate. He didn't speak unless necessary, yet the air around him vibrated with command, obsession, and power. She had learned painfully that his silence spoke louder than any word. The city slept lightly, but Elena Rossi felt wide awake, every nerve electric, every instinct alert. The kiss that had branded her in public was no longer just a memory. It was a shadow she carried with her, woven into the very air she breathed. And Luca Moretti, calm, composed, impossibly magnetic, was the force keeping that shadow alive, shaping it, controlling it. She could feel him beside her, the heat of his presence radiating, and the subtle weight of his hand brushing hers was enough to anchor her, and to claim her, all over again. They moved through the streets of Manhattan, Past neon-lit storefronts and glowing taxis, the city alive and oblivious to the storm that hovered around them. Elena's heart raced, partly from the thrill of danger, partly from the magnetic pull of him. Every glance from strangers seemed to shrink into insignificance beside the intensity of Luca's gaze, the quiet claim in his eyes. She had crossed a line she could never uncross, and every step forward was a reminder. She belonged to him. As they passed an alley, Elena sensed the subtle presence of someone watching. A flicker of movement, a shadow too deliberate to be random. Her stomach tightened, a warning signal she had learned to recognize in Luca's world. Before she could even react, he had moved, silent and commanding. His presence expanded, magnetic and lethal. The figure hesitated, uncertainty overtaking intention, and Elena realized with a shiver just how dangerous it was to be near him, and how untouchable she now was under his protection. The night carried them to a rooftop overlooking the shimmering river. The city stretched endlessly beneath them, indifferent and luminous. Luca's hand found hers again, fingers curling possessively. "They will always come," he murmured, voice low, steady, carrying the weight of inevitability. "But no one can take you. You are mine." His words landed like iron, undeniable, irreversible. Elena's chest tightened. Desire and fear collided within her, twisting into something she could not untangle. She hated the way he controlled her, feared the obsession, yet a dangerous thrill surged through her. Each touch, each glance, each moment since that first kiss had been a lesson. A subtle, unrelenting reminder that in Luca Moretti's world, love was measured in possession, and surrender was the only path to survival. The wind whispered across the rooftop, carrying the hum of the city below. Yet all Elena could hear was the rhythm of his voice, the pull of his presence. "You belong to me," he said softly, a declaration and a warning. She shivered, her pulse quickening. She could fight, resist, even run, but she knew the truth. She was entwined in his world now, bound by obsession, desire, and danger that would not let her go. Below, New York slept unaware of the tension above, yet the city had already witnessed enough. The kiss, the claim, the moment that had changed her life. It was etched into memory, public yet personal, violent yet intimate. Elena realized the unshakable truth. She could never escape him. She was his, completely, and the city, unknowingly, would forever remember her name. The night carried a tension that felt almost tangible, pressing down on Elena Rossi as she walked beside Luca Moretti. Every step they took through the glimmering streets of New York was a reminder of how far she had fallen, or perhaps how far she had been pulled, into his world. The kiss in public that had made her name infamous was no longer a singular event. It was a thread, woven into every moment since, a tether she could neither see nor cut. Luca moved beside her like a shadow with purpose. His tailored black suit, slick hair, and the tattoos along his neck and hands projected silent authority. Every glance, every slight movement radiated possession. Elena felt it in the brush of his fingers against hers, in the weight of his gaze. She wanted to pull away, to reclaim a sense of self she no longer fully possessed. Yet her body betrayed her. Every nerve was alive with the dangerous thrill of being claimed, of being desired, of being controlled. They turned a corner, and the city's neon signs reflected across the slick pavement, throwing fragmented light over her face. Somewhere ahead, figures lingered in shadow. Elena stiffened. She knew the signs, had learned to anticipate danger. But before fear could anchor itself, Luca was already moving, a silent force intervening. A subtle tilt of his head, a sharp glance, and the threat dissolved. Elena felt a shiver of awe. The world was dangerous, but under his protection she was untouchable. And yet, untouchable came with a price, one she was only beginning to understand. The night air grew colder as they reached a high rooftop overlooking the East River. Lights shimmered across the water, the city's pulse vibrating beneath them. Luca's hand found hers, fingers curling possessively. "They will always try," he murmured, voice low, deliberate. "But no one can take you. You are mine." The words landed like steel, their weight sinking deep into her chest. Elena's breath caught. The fight within her, between fear and desire, hate and attraction, raged quietly. She hated his control, yet she longed for it. She feared the obsession, yet craved the intensity it brought. Every encounter since the first kiss had reinforced a single truth. In Luca Moretti's world, love and power were inseparable, and surrender was not optional. The city hummed below, unaware, indifferent, Yet every neon reflection, every siren's wail, every distant murmur seemed to echo the tension that enveloped them. Luca leaned close, whispering, his voice brushing against her ear like fire and ice. "You belong to me, Elena, always. And the world will see it soon enough." Elena shivered, her pulse racing. She could resist, she could fight, she could dream of escape, but she knew it was an illusion. The threads of desire, danger, and obsession were already woven too tightly around her. She was his, utterly, irrevocably, and the city, unaware yet complicit, would always remember the night he claimed her, the night her name became legend, and in that suspended moment, atop the skyline, with the East River sparkling below and the city sprawling endlessly, Elena finally understood she could never be free. Not from him, not from the obsession, not from the dangerous, intoxicating love that had claimed her in full. She was his, completely, forever. The city stretched beneath them, glittering and indifferent, but Elena Rossi felt every pulse of it like a drumbeat in her chest. Each light, each distant siren, each blurred figure was a reminder of how deeply she had been pulled into Luca Moretti's world, a world of obsession, control, and dangerous, unrelenting desire. She walked beside him, aware of every subtle movement, every shift of his body, every glance that reminded her. She was his. Luca's presence was magnetic, suffocating, impossible to ignore. His tailored black suit hugged him perfectly, tattoos along his neck and hands catching fleeting glimpses of the neon glow. Every inch of him radiated authority, power, and possession. When his hand brushed hers, casual yet deliberate, Elena felt a shiver run through her. That single touch spoke volumes. She was claimed, marked, untouchable to anyone who might dare threaten her. The streets around them were alive with movement, oblivious to the storm that hovered just above the surface. People passed, unaware of the tension wrapping around the two of them, their whispers and glances dissolving into the distant hum of the city. Yet Elena could feel it, the unrelenting pull of danger, the silent authority he exuded, the intoxicating magnetism she could neither resist nor fully comprehend. A shadow moved at the edge of her vision, deliberate, watching. Her pulse quickened. Danger had a way of finding her, of testing her, of reminding her that life with Luca was never safe. Before panic could root itself, he was there, a silent force stepping between her and the threat. The intruder faltered, uncertainty replacing intent, and Elena realized again just how untouchable she was in his presence, yet how deeply tethered to him she had become. They reached a rooftop overlooking the East River, the skyline stretching endlessly, lights shimmering across the water like fractured glass. Luca's fingers curled around hers possessively, grounding her, claiming her. "They will always test you," he murmured, voice low, deliberate, full of quiet authority. "But no one will ever take you. Not the city, not enemies, not time itself. You are mine." Elena's chest tightened. Her body rebelled, yet leaned toward him. Her mind resisted, yet craved his intensity. Fear, desire, and fascination collided inside her, creating a heady, inescapable tension. The kiss in public had been only the beginning. Every moment since had been a lesson. A subtle, unrelenting reminder that in Luca Moretti's world, love and obsession were inseparable, and surrender was inevitable. The wind whispered across the rooftop, carrying distant traffic, the hum of New York, and the invisible weight of what they were. Luca leaned close, his lips brushing the shell of her ear, voice a magnetic whisper. "You belong to me, Elena, completely, forever." Elena shivered, her pulse racing. She could fight, resist, dream of escape, but the threads of desire and danger were already woven around her, binding her irrevocably. She was his, utterly, and the city, silent witness to everything, would always remember. And in that suspended moment, above the lights and shadows, she understood the undeniable truth. In Luca Moretti's world, possession was love, obsession was protection, and surrender was not a choice. It was destiny. The city below pulsed with life, unaware of the tension that wrapped around Elena Rossi like a second skin. Neon lights bounced off the wet streets, illuminating the shadows where danger always lingered. She moved beside Luca Moretti, every step a reminder of the claim he had made, every glance a quiet assertion that she belonged to him. Completely, irrevocably. Luca's presence was impossible to ignore. The sleek black of his tailored suit, the tattoos along his neck and hands, the calm, predatory precision in every movement. It radiated authority, power, obsession. When his fingers brushed hers, even lightly, Elena felt the weight of it. Possession, protection, desire, the kind of intensity that could burn or bind, sometimes both at once. They passed through a narrow street lined with closed shops, the reflections of neon signs dancing across puddles from a recent drizzle. Elena's pulse quickened as she caught a flicker of movement at the edge of her vision. Someone watching, calculating, waiting. Her stomach twisted with tension, but before fear could root itself, Luca had already shifted. His presence expanded, a silent warning. The figure faltered, hesitation replacing intent. Elena exhaled sharply, a mix of relief and awe flooding her chest. He kept her safe, untouchable, yet tethered her ever tighter to his world. The street soon opened onto a bridge, the East River shimmering beneath them, the Manhattan skyline stretching endlessly like a glittering labyrinth. Luca's hand found hers again, curling around it with possessive certainty. "They will always try," he murmured, voice low and deliberate. "But no one can touch you." "You are mine." Elena's chest tightened. She hated his control, feared the obsession. And yet, she couldn't deny the magnetic pull, the thrill that surged through her whenever he claimed her, whether with a touch, a glance, or a whisper. The kiss that had made her infamous was only the first domino. Each subsequent encounter had reinforced the truth she could no longer ignore. The night air carried the distant hum of the city, sirens, traffic, murmurs, but all Elena heard was him. Leaning closer, Luca whispered against her ear, his words like fire. "You belong to me, completely, forever." She shivered, a dangerous thrill crawling up her spine. Resistance was tempting, but futile. Every nerve, every heartbeat, every inch of her body was already entangled in him. Desire, fear, obsession, they wove around her in a web she couldn't escape. The city, oblivious, bore witness to none of this. But she knew the truth. The world had seen the first kiss, the first claim, and everything after had been inevitable. On the rooftop, above the lights and shadows, Elena understood with brutal clarity. Luca Moretti's world was absolute. Possession was love, obsession was protection, surrender was unavoidable. She was his, and the city, silent observer to their story, would remember her name forever. The night wrapped New York in shadows, but Elena Rossi could feel every flicker of light, every shimmer on the rain-slick streets, as if the city itself was holding its breath. She walked beside Luca Moretti, each step a reminder of the life she had lost and the world she had been pulled into. A world defined by power, obsession, and dangerous, intoxicating desire. The kiss in public that had branded her was no longer a single event. It was a chain, pulling her deeper into him, into his claim. Luca's presence beside her was impossible to ignore. Every movement radiated authority. The sleek lines of his tailored black suit, the tattoos etched along his neck and hands, the calm intensity in his dark eyes. It was a silent declaration that she was his. When his fingers brushed hers, it was a quiet, yet undeniable reminder that she was bound to him, in body and in heart. As they passed a narrow street lined with flickering neon lights, shadows shifted at the edges of Elena's vision. Figures lingered, watching, testing, waiting. Her pulse quickened, but before panic could settle, Luca was already moving, silent and precise. One glance, a subtle shift in stance, and the would-be threats faltered, uncertainty replacing intention. Elena shivered, a mix of fear and awe coursing through her. He kept her safe. Yet every act of protection reinforced the inescapable truth. She belonged to him. The streets opened onto a rooftop overlooking the river, the Manhattan skyline stretching endlessly before them. Luca's hand found hers again, fingers curling possessively, grounding her, claiming her. "They will always try," he murmured, voice low and deliberate, "but no one can take you." "You are mine." Elena's chest tightened. She wanted to resist, to reclaim control, yet every fiber of her being was drawn to him. Desire, danger, obsession. They all collided, igniting a tension that was impossible to ignore. The kiss that had captured the city's attention had been only the beginning. Every touch since had reminded her. In Luca Moretti's world, surrender was inevitable, and she had already crossed the line. The wind whispered across the rooftop, carrying distant sounds of the restless city below. Luca leaned close, his voice a dangerous whisper. "You belong to me, Elena. Always. Forever." The words sank deep into her chest, leaving her breathless, her thoughts scattered. She could dream of escape, resist with all her might, but the threads of obsession, desire, and possession were already woven around her. Elena looked out over the city, glittering and alive, and understood the brutal truth. She could never leave him. She was bound to him, in a web of power and passion that only intensified with each passing moment. The city had seen the first kiss, had whispered her name, and now the story continued, darker, more dangerous, and impossibly intoxicating. And in that suspended, electric night, she realized with clarity and trembling excitement, Luca Moretti's claim was absolute. She was his. Completely. Forever. The streets of New York hummed below, neon reflections glimmering on wet asphalt. But Elena Rossi's world had narrowed to the space beside Luca Moretti. Every step they took, every glance exchanged, was a reminder of the invisible chain that bound her to him. That first kiss in public, the one that had made her infamous, was no longer a memory. It was a living force, shaping her every heartbeat, every thought, every trembling step she took in his presence. Luca moved beside her like a predator in perfect control. The tailored black suit, the sleek dark hair, the tattoos snaking across his neck and hands, every detail radiated power, authority, and unrelenting claim. His fingers brushed hers occasionally, a casual touch that carried the weight of ownership. Elena felt it like gravity, impossible to resist, impossible to escape. Every instinct screamed resistance, yet every fiber of her body leaned toward him. They passed through a quieter street, shadows stretching long under flickering streetlights. Elena's heart caught when she noticed a figure lurking at the edge of her vision, a watcher, calculating, waiting. But before fear could root her to the pavement, Luca's presence expanded, lethal and magnetic. One sharp glance from him, a slight tilt of his stance, and the threat faltered, uncertainty replacing arrogance. Elena exhaled, both relieved and captivated. She was untouchable, yes, but only because she was tethered to him. And that tether was as intoxicating as it was binding. The night air grew colder as they reached a rooftop overlooking the glittering cityscape. The river shimmered beneath them, a ribbon of light and reflection. Luca's hand found hers, curling possessively, grounding her, claiming her. "They will always test you," he murmured, voice low and deliberate. "But no one can take you. Not the city, not enemies, not time. You are mine." Elena's chest tightened, caught in the collision of fear, desire, and fascination. She hated his control, feared his obsession, yet she was helplessly drawn to it. Every encounter since that first kiss had been a reminder. In Luca Moretti's world, surrender was inevitable, and she had already crossed the line. The city had witnessed the first spark, but the fire now consumed them both. Silent, invisible, unstoppable. The wind whispered across the rooftop, carrying the hum of the restless city below. Luca leaned closer, lips brushing her ear in a whisper that was both promise and warning. "You belong to me, Elena, always, forever." She shivered, her pulse racing, her thoughts scattered between fear and desire. She could fight, she could dream of escape, but the threads of obsession, power, and possession were already woven through her veins. Elena looked down at the endless city lights, understanding fully the reality of her fate. She was no longer just a girl from the East River. She was a mark, a claim, a presence in a world ruled by Luca Moretti. And the city, oblivious yet complicit, would remember her name forever. Above the glowing skyline, in that suspended moment, she understood the unshakable truth. Luca's claim was absolute. She was his. Completely. Irrevocably. Forever. The city below pulsed with life, indifferent and chaotic. But Elena Rossi felt suspended in a world all her own, one defined by Luca Moretti's presence, his obsession, and the invisible chains that bound her to him. Every step they took through the streets, every flicker of neon on the wet pavement, reminded her that she was no longer free. She was marked, claimed, and utterly entangled in a dangerous, intoxicating orbit she could never escape. Luca moved beside her with the silent authority of a predator. His tailored black suit clung perfectly to him, tattoos on his neck and hands glinting in the city lights. Every glance from his dark, intense eyes was a declaration, every subtle gesture a claim of possession. When his hand brushed hers, the touch was light but weighted with inevitability, a reminder that she belonged to him, completely and irrevocably. Elena's heart raced with a mix of defiance, fear, and desire, the three entwined like fire around her chest. They rounded a corner into a narrow street, shadows stretching long under the glow of flickering streetlights. Elena sensed the faint presence of watchers, figures lingering in the darkness, calculating, waiting. Her pulse quickened. Danger had a way of finding her, always lurking at the edges of her life. But before fear could root her to the spot, Luca moved, expanding into the space around her like a silent force of power and menace. One sharp glance, a subtle shift in stance, and the threat faltered, hesitation replacing intent. Elena exhaled, awe and relief mingling in her chest. She was untouchable, yes, but only because she was tethered to him. Caught in a web of obsession she couldn't untangle. The street soon opened to a rooftop overlooking the East River. The Manhattan skyline sprawling endlessly, glittering in the night. Luca's fingers curled around hers, possessive, grounding, claiming. "They will always try," he murmured, voice low, deliberate, every word weighted with certainty. "But no one can take you. Not the city, not enemies, not time itself. You are mine." Elena's chest tightened. She wanted to resist, to reclaim herself, to run. But every nerve, every heartbeat betrayed her. Desire, danger, obsession. They collided inside her, a storm she couldn't escape. The first kiss that had branded her had only begun the chain reaction. Every moment since, every claim, every touch, had reinforced the truth. In Luca Moretti's world, surrender was not optional. It was inevitable. The wind whispered across the rooftop, carrying distant sounds of traffic and sirens, yet Elena only felt Luca's presence, his proximity, his power. He leaned closer, lips brushing her ear with a whisper that burned through her mind. "You belong to me, Elena. Completely. Forever." She shivered, caught in the mix of fear and desire. Resistance was tempting, but futile. The threads of possession, obsession, and danger were woven into her very being. She was his, and the city, unaware yet complicit, would forever remember her name. Above the skyline, suspended between shadows and lights, Elena understood the brutal, intoxicating truth. Luca Moretti's claim was absolute. She was his, completely, irrevocably, forever. The city below seemed unaware, oblivious to the storm that swirled around Elena Rossi and Luca Moretti. Rain had long ceased, leaving wet streets that glimmered like shattered glass beneath the neon glow. Yet Elena barely noticed the lights or reflections. Her world had shrunk to the space beside him, to the undeniable gravity of his presence, and to the thrilling, terrifying certainty that she was no longer her own. Luca moved beside her like a shadow with intent. Every movement, every subtle shift of his tailored black suit, every flash of tattoos along his neck and hands radiated command. When his fingers brushed hers, casual yet deliberate, Elena felt the weight of his claim, the tether pulling her closer to him. Her chest tightened, pulse racing, mind divided between rebellion and surrender. Desire warred with fear, obsession with reason, and she realized with a shiver that she had already lost. They stepped into an alley where dim lights flickered, and the shadows seemed to lean closer, testing, waiting. Elena's heart jumped as she sensed figures lingering at the edges, watching, calculating. But before panic could root itself, Luca was there, a silent, lethal presence. A glance, a tilt of his posture, and the threat faltered, retreating into uncertainty. Elena exhaled sharply, awe mixing with adrenaline. She was untouchable, protected by him, but bound irrevocably to a world she could never leave. The alley opened to a rooftop, the skyline stretching endlessly, a cascade of lights and reflection across the East River. Luca's hand found hers again, fingers curling possessively, asserting control, grounding her in the intoxicating danger that surrounded them. "They will always try," he murmured, voice low, deliberate, carrying a promise and a warning. "But no one can take you. You are mine, have been, always will be." Elena's chest tightened further. She could fight, resist, or even run, yet her body and mind betrayed her, magnetized by him, ensnared by the thrill of his obsession. Every touch, every glance, every whispered word since that first fateful kiss had deepened the truth she could no longer deny. In Luca Moretti's world, surrender was inevitable, and she was already lost. The wind swept across the rooftop, carrying the faint hum of the city below. Yet all Elena heard was his presence, his claim, the low murmur that seemed to echo directly inside her mind. "You belong to me, Elena, completely, forever." A shiver ran through her, thrilling and terrifying all at once. Resistance was a thought she couldn't sustain. Escape an impossibility. She was tied to him, bound by obsession, desire, and danger, and she knew it. The city may have been unaware, but it had witnessed enough. The first kiss, the public claim. and now the inevitable tightening of the invisible chains around her heart. Above the lights and shadows, in that suspended electric moment, Elena understood the harsh, intoxicating truth. Luca Moretti's claim was absolute. She was his, completely, irrevocably, and forever. The city would remember her name. But only she and he truly understood the depth of what that kiss had started. The city was a glittering labyrinth below, indifferent to the story that had taken root on a quiet rooftop above the East River. Elena Rossi stood beside Luca Moretti, every nerve alive, every heartbeat synchronized with the dangerous rhythm of his presence. The first kiss, that audacious public declaration, had been only the beginning. Tonight, the truth of their bond, the depth of obsession and possession, had reached its pinnacle. Luca's presence was magnetic, suffocating, unavoidable. His tailored black suit, tattoos on neck and hands, and the dark intensity of his eyes made the world fall away. When his fingers found hers, curling possessively, Elena felt the finality of it. The undeniable, unbreakable claim he had placed on her. She wanted to resist, to pull away, to reclaim even a sliver of freedom, but the pull of him was irresistible, and she knew with trembling certainty that she never could. The skyline stretched endlessly before them, each light a distant witness to the life she had left behind, the quiet, ordinary girl she once was. That girl no longer existed. She was transformed, forged by the fire of obsession, desire, and the relentless intensity of Luca Moretti. Every step they had taken together had been a lesson in power, control, and surrender. Every touch, every whisper, every stolen glance had bound her irrevocably to him. "Do you understand?" Luca murmured, his voice low, deliberate, echoing like a dark promise across the rooftop. "You are mine. Completely. Forever." Elena shivered, a mix of fear and exhilaration coursing through her. She could feel the invisible threads that connected them, tightening with every word, every heartbeat, every shared glance. She hated the way he controlled her, feared the obsession that radiated from him, yet she craved it in ways she could not name, ways she could never escape. The city had witnessed the first spark, but now the fire was uncontainable, consuming everything in its orbit. Figures lingered in the shadows below, watchers, enemies, curious strangers, yet they were irrelevant. The world could look, could whisper, could speculate, but it could never touch her here, in the gravity of Luca's claim. He had made her untouchable, powerful, visible and invisible all at once. The kiss that had branded her in the streets had been just the opening act. Tonight, she understood the full scale of the story, the intensity, the permanent tie that bound her to him. Elena took a deep breath, letting the wind carry away fear, hesitation, and doubt. There was no turning back, no reclaiming the quiet life she had once known. She was caught in Luca Moretti's orbit, and she could not escape. Above the lights and shadows, the city sprawled endlessly, oblivious yet complicit. As Elena finally embraced the truth, she was his, absolutely, irrevocably, forever. And in that suspended, electric moment, the final act of Part 2, the city knew her name, but only she and Luca knew the depth of what that kiss had truly claimed. The story isn't over yet. Elena's fate, Luca's obsession, and the secrets of New York are far from done. If you want to see what happens next, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and be the first to witness the next chapter of this. Subscribe for Part 3, or don't miss the next twist. Dark Mafia Romance.